Well, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm going to call to order the January 9th to 2026 meeting of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. Would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lou.
Here.
Chair Vinker.
Here.
Councilmember Burt. For the record, 2 present.
Thank you. All right, and with that, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to standing verbal reports, Director Eggleston, do you have comments?
Yes, I do have one. Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works, and we have an update on our single-family home electrification program. So utilities will be launching a direct installation program for home electrification in the first quarter of 2026, our new year. This program will provide turnkey electrification through Franklin Energy and will offer fixed price and assistance to customers electrifying their homes from start to finish, including heating, water heating, cooking, clothes drying, and replacement of many other home gas uses, although I think those are the main ones. The full service aspect of the turnkey home electrification program complements our current home electrification program in Palo Alto that provides rebates, technical assistance, and go green financing to residents who want to replace their gas appliances, but choose to select their own contractors and rebates rather than use the city contractor. So this is something that's been in the works for a while and that we've discussed with the committee in the past, but we're excited to have this finally rolling out.
That is exciting. And I do recall that we've had some anticipatory discussions, but my memory fades. But when you say start to finish, does the customer have some choice about how many of those items you mentioned, or what? Remind me how that
Yes, they do. They can essentially work with us and the contractor and select whichever appliances they'd like to do. They can also work with us to develop a plan that may involve replacing appliances over time rather than all at once.
Well, that's fabulous, and I may be one of your early customers. Okay, and with that, we'll move to committee member comments and announcements. I feel like I'm loud. Is this loud? No?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you happen to have any today, Councilmember Lou? No. Okay, well, I have a couple, and the first one, as I mentioned, we will need to adjourn on time because I may or may not have places to go. Because there is a Peach Bowl today and my alma mater is playing in it. And this has just like never happened that we've done this. So it's at 4:30, so we should be good, but just giving you due notice. But no, I want to thank staff again and our community and just everybody for a really fabulous retreat. The people who participated, I mean, a great variety of our wonderful community members and climate leaders who were there. And I just thought it was a terrific way to end the year. And the fact that so many people came in a busy December just really speaks well of it. So thank you again for taking the time to do that during your busy holiday season. Then I also just wanted to note, because I think it's important as we, are looking forward to this new year. I don't think it should go unnoticed that the backdrop against which we're doing this work, we all know that the federal government did not send delegates to COP this year, but I think we also have to note that earlier this week, just a couple of days ago, our president withdrew the United States from the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is basically the world's overarching treaty on climate change. And the White House is asserting that it no longer serves U.S. interests by promoting what it called radical climate policies. And as far as I know, the UNFCCC has universal participation, and we are the first industrialized nation. We were the first to join, and I believe we're the only one who is left. So I just think that's worth noting that as we go forward as a city, we're going forward as a city and state and subnationals, and nevertheless we persist. But I think it's important to be aware of these things that are happening. Also wanted to let folks know that while there's no standard Air District Board meeting this month, there is our board retreat going on Wednesday, January 28th. We're going out into the community, specifically into Oakland. We're inviting our Citizens Advisory Committee members to be part of that agenda. And looking at the priorities for the year. So anyone who's interested in those, you can Zoom in. Unfortunately, I cannot attend in person because I'll be in Washington, D.C. at a meeting, but I think it's going to be a really interesting and great time for community input to the Air District agenda for the year. And then finally, with NCPA, the annual conference is going to be in Sacramento this month, January 20th through 21st, with the commission meeting on the 22nd. I'm also grateful to UIC Chair Scharf and alternate commissioner covering the January 26th CMUA Policy Day. That's, I believe, the California Municipal Utilities Association. Did I get it right? Day in Sacramento. So that'll be terrific to have him there. And thank you to staff for staffing all of that. So those are my background comments for the verbal report, which leads us to our one action item, but it's a great one because we are looking today at our Climate Action and Sustainability Committee recommendation to council to approve the 26 to 27 work plan and accept 4 SCAP studies. And I know we've seen, pieces of this come previously, so I'm excited it's coming back and excited to hear your presentation, discuss it, and figure out what to send to council. So, Director Eggleston.
Okay, well, you gave much of my intro already, but that is good. So no, it's all good. So just noting, really following the many successes we've had over the past 3 years, as staff and council and committee have worked on the strategies in the 2023 through 2025 SCAP work plan. We are excited to bring to you now to the committee staff's recommendation for the 2-year work plan for 2026 and 2027. And as noted, this is it's building on 3 discussions that we had with the committee about the work plan items during 2025, as well as feedback we heard from the December 13th climate action workshop and a number of working group meetings where we reviewed the work plan items and talked about other ancillary topics that really feed into the strategies here. So Christine Long, our sustainability manager, and Jonathan Abenshine, assistant director of climate action, are going to give the presentation, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Christine Long, sustainability manager. Next slide, please. So we've talked about this many times before. As a reminder, our Sustainability and Climate Action Plan, which we call the SCAP for short, is a comprehensive document that lays out the city's strategy to achieve our carbon reduction goals while also improving our natural environment, adapting to climate impacts, and increasing livability for Palo Alto residents. And while our 80 by 30 goal, the reducing emissions 80% by 2030 relative to a 1990 baseline, while that is the main focus of the SCAP, Palo Alto believes in a comprehensive view of sustainability. So we have divided the SCAP into 2 sort of groups. We have 4 areas in the climate action area, climate action, energy, electric vehicles, and mobility. And those primarily focus on the overarching goals of 80 by 30 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2030. And then we have the sustainability areas of water, climate adaptation and sea level rise, natural environment, and zero waste, which don't necessarily have a huge greenhouse gas reduction impact, but have critically important sustainability, public health and safety, regional resource conservation, and equity benefits that contributed to overall climate action. So without further ado, as Brad alluded to, the 2023-2025 SCAP work plan guided our implementation priorities for the SCAP for the previous 3 years. And most of those priorities are either completed or on track to be completed. And as a result, we have
We have next.
not yet worked on the next iteration of the 2026 to 2027 work plan. Next slide, please. So to recap the 2023 to 2025 SCAP work plan, the climate action side had 50 work items. And the sustainability side had 27 work items. And I would like to note that in your packet, attachment A, incorrectly labeled commuter transportation and EV charging strategy, and publicly owned charger strategic plan. Those 2 items were incorrectly labeled as delayed when they should have been labeled as in progress. So, which is why on the slide you see there is 1 item delayed for climate action and 1 item delayed for sustainability. So the 2 delayed projects were 2.3H, evaluate the expansion of employer transportation demand management, which was not started due to lack of staff capacity and was also not added to the 2026 to 2027 work plan. And 8O, establish a baseline and key performance indicator for carbon storage of tree canopy. The establish the carbon storage baseline portion was delayed due to lack of the necessary measurement software and equipment, and was also not added to the 2026 to 2027 work plan, which doesn't mean it won't happen. It's just not a priority. Next slide, please. So for the 2026 to 2027 SCAP work plan, we have 28 strategies in climate action and 16 strategies in sustainability and 3 strategies for overall SCAP communications. The in progress or delayed items that were dropped from the 2026 to 27 work plan, as I previously mentioned, were the evaluate the TDM. The other item that was discussed that we did not move forward was the downtown parking availability, which related to parking pricing and was removed based on committee feedback. And on the sustainability side, and also on the climate side, the 2023 to 2025 SCAP work plan in progress strategies that we are continuing in the 2026 to 2027 work plan are CA10, workplace EV charging pilot, /CA18, public charging and siting, CA20, which is gas transition management, CA22, which is implement micromobility feasibility study recommendations, and CA26, develop and begin implementing a city facility electrification plan. On the sustainability side, we are not moving forward 8J, identify protection strategies from significant flood events, or 8L, minimize fire hazards through zoning, because it's included in the implement the foothills fire management plan strategy. The 2023 to 2025 SCAP work plan in progress strategies that we are continuing in 2026 to 2027 are S2, the recycled water salt removal facility, S5, updating our sea level rise adaptation policy, and S15, eliminating single-use disposable containers and reduce disposable foodware. So that is a quick summary. Now Assistant Director of Climate Action, Jonathan Abenshine, will review the climate action strategies in more detail.
Thank you, Christine. Next slide. So there are 28 strategies for the climate action areas of the SCAP, and they span several different areas of focus. In the single family, multifamily, and non-residential sectors, we're focused on programs. And over 2023 through 2025, there were 2 focuses. We were doing some small pilots and then we had one really large flagship pilot, the Advanced Heat Pump Water Heater Pilot Program. And then in parallel, we were doing studies to provide us the data and information we would need to branch out into other sectors in the 2026 through 2027 period. And we're using a lot of the data that we got from those studies to expand programs in the multifamily and non-residential areas while continuing a lot of the progress that we've made in the single family area. And then as part of these programs, we also want to pilot some creative financing approaches. Next slide, please. And then the other sections that support long-term strategy or infrastructure or represent citywide efforts, we have the mobility section and the city facilities section. The mobility section is more targeted with a priority on capital improvement bike infrastructure projects, and matches the resources that are available for mobility right now. In the city facilities area, there's a general focus on fleet and city facilities, as well as we added, based on feedback, talking about the electric capacity needs of the Palo Alto Airport for electric aviation. Grid modernization and the gas transition remain in the work plan, although these are broad, ongoing priorities that provides a lot of opportunity for flexing how those programs are managed based on the rate of electrification and the needs. And then there are a number of studies or efforts, regulatory and strategic efforts. But in contrast to a lot of the work in 2023 through 2025, a lot of this work is in-house and direct regular contact with policymakers on some of these topics, or they're sort of ongoing internal efforts to do things like streamline permitting and reduce barriers. And I'll turn it back to Christine.
On the sustainability side, there are 16 strategies, 3 in water, 5 in climate adaptation and sea level rise, focused on sea level rise and wildfire protection, 3 in the natural environment, focused on natural environment and green stormwater infrastructure, and 3 in zero waste. And since we already covered this at length, I'm not going to go into too much detail. Next slide, please. And what I will say is that later on in the presentation, I will review the items that have changed from the August 22nd version. What is new is the 3 strategies around communications. These strategies cover both the climate action and sustainability areas of the work plan, and will work towards advancing progress towards our 80 by 30 and climate neutrality by 2030 goals. So Assistant Director Shine will now provide more information on the development of the climate action strategies for the new work plan.
So next slide, please. We had several meetings where we received feedback that we incorporated into the work plan. On mobility, we had an explicit conversation with the committee about the 2026-2027 mobility work plan. And some of the feedback we took and incorporated into the work plan was that, first off, downtown parking pricing and management was not included as a climate item. And then we looked carefully, especially given the budget environment right now, at what strategies were unfunded or underfunded. And that included transportation demand management, expansion of bike, walk, and transit education and encouragement programs to all adults, while programs focused on schools do continue. And then conducting a land use and transportation study, which we felt we didn't have the bandwidth for. Next slide, please. We also incorporated feedback from the May 5th and December 13th committee meetings. And some of the focuses include supporting residents in complying with the air district regulations. There is more policy work, I think, to be done on that in 2026. We want to make sure we're exploring creative financing, providing guidance to renters. This is incorporated. And looking at efficient approaches to electrification projects, like doing multiple electric readiness projects at one time rather than doing them one after another, and using smart meter data to evaluate home electric loads. When evaluating panel adequacy, we can explore and pursue that topic as well in the 2026 through 2027 period. Although I think there is already some work being done on that. Next slide, please, Christine.
So for the sustainability side, we moved everything over to this final version of the work plan that was previously discussed. We did make a change based on feedback to S6. We added the text in green that the city and partner agencies will advance monitoring and research following project completion, anticipated in early 2026 for the horizontal levy item. Next slide, please. For S11, green stormwater infrastructure project at City of Palo Alto. This was primarily a wording change and a specification that the target completion date is target completion date for the design, which will be September of 2027. Next slide, please. And then for zero waste, based on committee feedback, S14, we added including textile reuse and recycling for the champion waste prevention, reduction, reusables, and sharing economy item. And then for S15, also incorporating committee feedback, we changed it to eliminate single-use disposable containers and added and reduce disposable food bin. Next slide, please. So in addition to the 2026 to 2027 SCAP work plan, we are also asking the committee to receive for SCAP studies.
Sure. These were the, and I'll say 6 studies, although 3 of them are very similar to each other, the building sector studies. These are studies whose insights we've talked about over the last year, even some of these insights earlier than that. And we've been using data from these studies to help us with program development and developing and strategy and planning. The 6 studies provide data and modeling tools that we can use to develop both programs and then policy alternatives for council and committee consideration in 2026 and 2027 to help us figure out what sorts of policy alternatives we're comfortable considering for our effort to expand electrification community-wide. And I will say there were 3 illustrative scenarios that were modeled as part of the SCAP funding and financing study. These illustrated some of the financial dynamics of community-wide electrification, but they're based on assumptions that need to be updated. The federal policy environment has changed, and so we're going to work. One of our work plan items is to build scenarios that could represent actual policy choices for the committee and council to consider for future community-wide electrification. So that's why we're asking to just receive these studies that do not necessarily represent policy choices that we might consider. Next slide, please.
And we had a great conversation with our climate. We had a great conversation with our climate action working group. They provided feedback. There was consensus that there were a lot of great strategies in the 2026 to 2027 work plan, which reflected a lot of the prior stakeholder feedback. There were some questions about whether or not there was adequate staffing to implement the plan. And there was a question about what happened to the strategy on downtown parking pricing, which we covered. And we had a good conversation about how we as a city can better support and learn from early adopters, since we have a reputation for innovation. And there was discussion about adding more granular details on SCAP progress. We do have a rather simple dashboard at the moment that just looks at our overall greenhouse gas emissions, but there was a request to have more than that, more than just emissions reductions. Then that could be a tool for citywide climate outreach. Next slide, please. Do you want to come to?
Sure. There were questions about whether certain topics were included in the work plan. There was a little discussion on building envelope on energy efficiency related to tightening up building envelopes. That's not in the work plan, but it is part of routine utility energy efficiency evaluations. Right sizing electric panels and carbon pricing were brought up. And we noted that we can explore and address those topics as part of CA 16 in the work plan. Building performance standards are actually listed in the work plan under CA 14 as a regulatory mechanism to look into. And then heat island, there was some discussion of heat island effects and how they were addressed in the plan. There was a note that in S9 on the urban canopy, there is some note of how expansion of the urban canopy can address heat island effects, but we just noted for the working group that this was explored separately and more broadly by Stanford students and shared that information with them separately.
Next slide, please. So the next steps after today would be for the city council to receive and review to review and approve the 2026 to 2027 SCAP work plan and also receive the SCAP studies. Next slide, please. So the staff recommendation for today is staff recommends that the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee recommend that the city council approve the 2026 to 2027 SCAP work plan and receive the following studies. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. It's nice to see this come together, having sort of coalesced into this work plan. And particularly that since we can't have the same kind of colloquy with the working group that we used to, that you have, and that you've incorporated it here. So that's terrific that we can now look at all of that as a whole. So before we go to the committee, do we have public comment on this item? I anticipate that we do, and I look forward to it.
We do. Our first request to speak is from David C.
Welcome. Oh, just quickly before you start, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to welcome Councilmember Byrd. I know you are at another public meeting, so we appreciate you racing down here. Just want to note for the record he's here.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is David Cole with Carbon Free Palo Alto. A lot of great work has been done on this with a lot of great studies, and so it's really great to see this progress, and especially as you mentioned, Chair, the meeting on December, the community meeting was really great when they brought out the energy as a service type of concept. I think that's really a good one. I think one thing that's missing from a lot of these studies is the actual emissions, because at the end of the day, it's the emissions that we're after. And so I think any council members will want to see, oh, it's a lot of work here, but where are the numbers here? Instead of the broad brush. I think those numbers, I realized they're, how you say, squishy, especially when you talk about transportation numbers. But they'll also potentially guide each one of the projects in terms of importance. And if you look at that with respect to cost, then you get your bang for buck. And so far, I don't see that in these studies as laid out. So I think that could be an important aspect added to these reports. The other thing is, I remember Director Eggleston was saying that 5% of the population knows about the ESCAP goal. And so this leads to the communication part of the plan. This needs to obviously be much more robust if the city's going to meet these goals. And it needs to be an outreach in some way where 50% or more people know about this, because 100% of people are going to have to participate if we're going to make this goal. So that needs some more thought of how we do this, how we engage the community, how we really get buy-in on these things. I think that's overall across any program in this city for any length of time, it's always been the hardest aspect is community outreach. And the same is true for this program. So I think that needs some attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cedric D.
Good afternoon. Thanks for hosting this meeting. This is Cedric de la Beaujardière. It's a lot of good work that you're doing on the SCAP. I appreciate your focus on this. I first off echo David Cole's excellent comments. He's been a great advocate in this space. In addition, I was happy to see the foodware effort to stop using disposable containers and utensils and such. I'd love you to get the restaurants to stop packing utensils and other to-go orders unless the customers explicitly order them. I've got a big box full of stupid plastic forks that I've got nothing to do with. Also to stop using the plastics, especially the black ones, which are really not recyclable and supposedly have dangerous chemicals in them, and start using compostable containers. Ideally, like really fully compostable, like even whatever coating is on the inside to prevent moisture leaking out of the cardboard. On the pesticide area, I would really love the city to address pesticide use on private property. You've got a great integrated pest management plan for city parks. But meanwhile, we have homeowners just going by gallons of Roundup and just spraying indiscriminately. The populations of bees are in decline across the country, including in our area, and other pollinators. And so you might frame this as, oh, this is a private property rights issue, but really it's a commons issue. When people spray pesticides indiscriminately and without knowledge of how to apply them judiciously, they end up not just killing whatever thing they don't necessarily need to kill, but they might want to kill, but they also pollute the environment and damage all sorts of the ecology. So the ecology, our pollinators are in decline and they're under threat due to climate disruption. So we really need to be proactive to protect our native ecosystems from these poisons. And then finally, on the fire side of things, I don't know if it's in your fire plan, but I think we need to have a concerted effort to go through the wildlands and trim back any dead wood and then pile up the dead wood that's trimmed in a half moon on the downslope side of the tree bases. So this would capture stormwater that's running off the slope and other organic debris. So it would be kind of a twofer of both removing buildup fire potential from the trees as well as creating structures that help to keep the
Thank you. Your time is up.
watered. Thank you.
That concludes public comment on item number 1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, why don't I ask Councilmember Liu if he has any questions, comments on the work plan?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate this work. I like how there are fewer strategies in a way that is digestible, and I like that communications is really elevated. in its own section, and I hope that we can work with the communications team to get more regular updates on how the communication is going. My partner is going to be really excited about the textile recycling. I know that this is not the time to dig particularly deeply into the funding and financing report, but I found that to have a lot of really interesting details. And I agree with David Cole in that that is where we actually get the bang for the buck numbers in terms of our climate dollars spent and ultimate feasibility of our 80 by 30 goal. So I have lines of questions about that funding and financing report. What's the right way to address that? Should I try to stay high level? Like, are we?
I think we should. Yeah.
Yeah, we can tackle what we can now, and if there are additional questions after that, we could look for another opportunity.
Okay. I think the overall just the takeaway for me is that we have to find a way onto the high action scenario or close to the high action scenario. And along the way, we need to confirm if the high action scenario, if implemented, actually solves our problems and actually gets us to 80 by 30, which again, not clear based on a variety of assumptions there. And then we need to clarify if we can actually fund it. But taking away the work plan, is it possible to try to map that onto a low action, medium action, high action scenario? It seems like this work plan is still very geared toward financing, incentives, no mandates. So would it be fair to characterize this work plan as more in the low action scenario?
I would characterize it as somewhere between. So I guess two notes on that. There's a dimension to this where the pace of electrification depends on the level of community uptake.
Right.
But and so it really is a partnership. But for that uptake to happen, the city needs to be offering services. And so in terms of the pace that we would need to hit to achieve 80 by 30, it would require extraordinary levels of public participation, including early retirement of equipment.
Yeah.
I would so given that, and that was what was modeled was an event like that in the high local action scenario. I would say that this is more on the medium. So it's somewhere between the low and the high.
Right.
And can I just add a little bit to say that I agree with what Assistant Director Abendschein said about the actual explicit actions in the work plan being more aligned to the medium. But we do have this section on regulatory analytics, finances, strategy that includes consideration of other types of items that are more the types of items that while we may not have made decisions to adopt them currently, can still be considered. So we've got funding and financing strategies, evaluation and consideration of regulatory measures, evaluation of items on cost-based pricing of decarbonization. So within the work plan, while the things we're committed to doing may be more aligned with the medium scenario, it also contains further work with the committee and council to evaluate things that give flexibility to move more towards the high pathway.
Okay. And just feel free to skip this if it's getting too far into the weeds, but do we think that the high pathway is even feasible or possible, even with the extraordinary amounts of investment that the report proposes? Because even if we do have mandates and incentives and penalties, it still seems extraordinarily difficult for all single family homes to be fully electric by 2030, for example. So is the high scenario, even if we commit, what was it, like $50 million a year, even going to happen? Like, are any of those assumptions
Yeah, it depends.
valid?
It depends entirely. Um, the high local action illustrative scenario was, it didn't make any assertions about whether it was possible to achieve that. It just laid out the financial implications if the community decided to move at that pace. And it did take into account the additional costs related to early retirement of equipment. So it really depends a lot on both the community and the speed at which the city is able to implement programs. But I would say that question about what pace is reasonable for the community is one that no doubt will be discussed in the context of
Right.
the different funding strategies that and scenarios that we talk about through 2026 and 2027 using these modeling tools.
Okay. And maybe my last question for now, because I want to hear what my colleagues think and like maybe reorder some of my questions, is that I found the funding and financing study interesting in that it proposed the ongoing cost gap by year. So the cost of high local action was around 2030 going to be around $50 million a year, or $46 million. Do we know what the city currently spends per year, or how these programs translate into a budget for 2027 or something hypothetically like that?
Yeah.
I'd just be curious how close we are, like if we are spending the cumulative millions that we are actually spending now.
We don't have the revenue source for anything like that. The sort of the scale of actual spending that we may be able to do through FY27, FY28 is something to discuss through the budget process.
Right.
So I don't have a lot of information for you on that right now. But there's no doubt that additional revenue sources would be needed to move on that timeline. The additional revenue sources, taxes, other revenues would be different on different timelines. And so that's what I forget which number is for the financing strategies, but that's what we're going to bring back to you to dig into.
Okay. Okay, I'll wrap my questions there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to jump in with just a couple of high-level general questions that relate to the conversations we've had so far before I move to Councilmember Burt, and then I'll come back to some of my specific questions. And one is, I just wanted to ask generally about the point that David Cole made about emission numbers, and specifically, one of the measures that we use a lot at the Air District in trying to prioritize is sort of the carbon efficiency numbers, the dollars per ton, that type of thing. And so can you just comment on, how we could move more toward that, or if you see it more in there and we're not appreciating, or just because it is a useful tool. It's not necessarily the only consideration, but it's certainly a useful one when you're getting down to comparable alternatives.
So achieving those 80% reductions, it really is an all hands on deck exercise. You really need to do everything, but we have tried to start with a focus on the more cost efficient areas. Excuse me. Generally, electric vehicles are your most cost efficient measures. Then space heating, and there's a more cost efficiency with certain types of heaters in the commercial and multifamily area, and then water heating tends to be a little bit less cost efficient, although in our case, because we were still working out grid modernization, it did make sense as a first place to focus during the 2023 through 2025 period. So we do have charts on that in the SCAP funding and financing study, and I'm happy to follow up and point people to those. But that's essentially what you'll find in those charts. And then there's some small appliances that are either have large savings or large costs, but they don't factor in on a dollars per ton basis, but the absolute costs are very small and they don't factor in heavily to the carbon emissions calculations, things like dryers.
And then related to how our overall emissions reductions are doing, council will be getting in the February 9th council meeting. We'll be presenting both the 2023 and the 2024 greenhouse gas emissions inventories as the citywide as well as the municipal. So you'll have a better idea of where we are, how we're doing in the different sectors.
Yeah, that's helpful because I think there may be some more granularity. I appreciate it. It's helpful to think of, the dollars per ton, sort of the EVs, space heating, water heating, et cetera. But even within that, the different strategies for EV adoption, some are going to be more efficient than others. And, when we look at greenhouse gas reductions, which greenhouse gas, and there's all this choices there. And to the extent that some of that cost efficiency can be baked in, I think it'd be helpful.
I can say a little bit extra on that. So when we think about the cost efficiency of the measure itself, it's really just the cost of the measure and then the carbons divided by the carbon saved. And so the solution there is a little bit out of our hands. It's can vendors get prices down for some of these measures? That's what reduces the dollars per ton. But in terms of who pays that cost, and who has the available benefit that can offset that cost. Funding and financing design and where you get revenues to pay incentives or to help with repayments of financing or things like that. They can make a real difference in the efficiency to each individual entity in the equation, whether it's the city, whether it's the community member, whether it's a financing entity. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be working on through 2026 and 2027. How do you design the most cost efficient ways to fund these measures, which often have a higher upfront cost but can provide savings over time in a way that makes each person feel like what they're paying, or each entity in the equation, each person feel like they are paying either what they can afford or something in line with the benefits that they receive.
Yeah, no, and I think that is a smart way to look at it, but the ability to bear the upfront cost, of course, is going to vary greatly depending on whether it's an entity or an individual and which individual.
Yeah.
So I think having the data on what that, the bang for the buck is essentially helps us also navigate some of those choices. And there's not like a right or wrong answer, but it's just, I just think it's a helpful thing. So, you can talk more about that through the year, I guess, as we live into the work plan, but I think it's just actually very useful. But you mentioned with respect to EV charging, that was my second question, which is when you're going through the presentation and mentioned how there's a lot of things changing, particularly federal policy, such that, in some of these reports, not even all the alternatives that we will ultimately figure out against this new landscape are there yet. And then I think there's there's more focus on building emissions, but I'm just curious with EV adoption, I think that could be even perhaps more impacted given just the many changes in not just some of the federal tax subsidies and federal funding, which have clearly been pulled back, but now we're having more of a focus. There's interest in increased oil production. There's the whole Clean Air Act. I'm just curious if how we would go about figuring out what we think about the ongoing debate about EV adoption rates and how they're going to be impacted. Like some say, oh, it's going to be really cut off, and others say, oh, people like a car, we're far enough into it, there won't be. There's a huge debate right now about what the impact of our political environment is going to be on EV adoption rates. And that is such a priority of ours because of the bang for the buck. How are we going to navigate, what do we do in terms of assumptions on that?
So I don't think we have an answer to that quite yet. We're going to have to throw ourselves into that debate a little bit more as we start preparing these policy alternatives. And I would say that one of the challenging things is that we don't have as many levers on electric vehicles as we do on buildings. But the one lever we do have is making sure that there is available charging. And so that's where you're going to find, I have to look up the number, but there are several climate work plan items focused on making sure that the chargers are available and that they're installed in ways that will maximize their utilization and that they're done very cost efficiently. So again, the costs are aligned with the benefits. Throwing incentives at it is not going to be the solution.
Okay, thank you. Those are just my general thoughts at a high level, but I'll come back to my specific ones here. But yeah, I appreciate your comment about just even where and how we deploy EV infrastructure. It could get a lot different bang for the buck, and so that'll be something else we'll keep an eye on. Councilmember Burt.
Yeah, thanks. So first, I'd just like to say that I think we have a really strong plan by several comparisons. By comparison to where we've been in the past, and by comparison to what I assume are plans by other entities. But I don't really know that because I haven't seen such a comparison. I have the reference point of what we've done, but have we looked at plans that other communities or CCAs have done, and where ours is by comparison?
We've looked broadly at, most other cities have climate action plans, as you know. We've looked broadly at their climate action plans. There are fewer implementation plans to compare to, but the ones we have compared to, generally speaking, we have a lot more advanced strategies than other cities.
That's what I assume, and I think we ought to lay that out there. That ought to be something that we actually are identifying and recognizing that even though as strong as this plan is, it seems likely that we're going to fall short of our 80-30 goal. And that's not our fault. It was a goal that was set. When we first set it, we were one of the first cities globally to set it. Nobody had a strategic plan. And the leading cities are continuing to push the envelope like us. And there was no way of knowing what it would take to get where we were all hoping to go. And I think we are doing an effort that is exceptional, but is also likely to fall short of that goal. And so it could be looked at as somehow a failure unless we looked at everyone else and said, yeah, but we are doing better than virtually anyone. Now, there may be some exceptions, and we'd want to understand that. If any are progressing further, how are they doing that? And we certainly want to learn from them as others learn from us. So I think that's one thing I really value. And then on the issue that Vicky brought up about really understanding the impacts of each of our strategies. What's the cost per ton, and how many tons do we get from each strategy? And that also is something, quantifying that is not something that we can pull off the shelf. It's not easy to do. And at best, we would have ranges. The ranges reflecting both our current estimates as well as the unknowns. Like John said, well, what's going to happen on technology progressions? Well, okay, that's in the upper end of the range, and we can't bet on that right now. We can have a high and a low and a median that we look at. But I think this is still extremely important that we attempt to give some at least order of magnitude association of quantitative numbers, both costs and the degree of reductions that would come from each strategy.
I can
Yeah, go ahead.
share something on that. So those numbers will depend a lot on what goals we set and how much funding we provide for each of these work plan items. And so quantifying that is actually not as challenging as it was several years ago, in part because of the work that we did with the SCAP funding and financing studies and the building sector study data that we got. So we are incorporating that viewpoint into the FY27 budget development. And I'm hoping I'll be able to share more information about that once we work through all that.
Great, and I appreciate that we're more able to do it than we were and less able than we will be. You know, it's a moving target. And then I did want to touch on the communication plan, which is in the staff report on page 10. And in C1, it says achieve widespread awareness and about sustainability and climate action, city services and programs and achievements. One, it doesn't talk about the goal, and that's foundational. So I would definitely want to include that. But I was able to join the last advisory group meeting, and we had some folks who were really had a very much a communications professional background and orientation on this. And I think what really emerged from that conversation is that as much as we've felt like we've been communicating a lot to our community, we haven't got through as much as we expected and as much as we need to. And actually by a lot, we haven't gotten through. That was really kind of shocking to me because I'm aware of how much communication we've been doing. So I think that absent solving that problem, we won't get all these other strategies or most of them implemented to the degree that we otherwise could do so. So I think that the communication, rather than being something, thinking of it as something that's an important parallel effort, and the more I think about it, it's foundational, that we just aren't going to get there unless we solve the communication problem. Not say, yeah, we're doing a bunch of communication. We have to say we have to solve the problem. That's easier said than done, but I think if we don't recognize that and put it as a real high priority, then we could beat our heads against the wall on a lot of this stuff.
And I just want to share that we've taken that approach pretty heavily with respect to the water heater program, and I think made a lot of progress on that. We've identified, where in the process are people dropping out, for example, and tailoring communications or the types of promotions that we do to those sorts of issues that we identify. And we're looking forward to bringing that same approach to outreach around climate action generally.
Good. And I think on that communications, even the plan does already refer to collaborate with partnerships and volunteers on that. My gut is that's both the opportunity and necessity to do that even significantly more than we have. And we've been leaders in that. We are not laggards in that. And yet we just need to face up to, okay, we've been doing a lot, and what's it going to do to get us across the goal line? And then on CA 16, which is, John, where you talked, it's efficient electrification. And that's where you responded to the concerns and about kind of these addressing the oversized panels, oversized EV charging, the low watt approach, all these, that bucket of things that are related and that we have been talking about for several years. We now, in our, I think it's in the resiliency and reliability plan, it really recognizes that. But then in our strategies, what we're saying is, well, we think we could put it under this category. And I don't think it's elevated enough, whether it needs its own strategy, because I wasn't clear when I read that CA 16. I don't know, I just read the summary. Let's see. It does go into greater detail in the actual plan than it was in the staff report. So that's great. But one, I don't know if we ought to rename it so that everybody understands what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to point you to CA 17.
Okay.
So CA 16 specifically has something about pricing, about price related incentives, but CA 17 covers with a broad brush all of the different types of barrier reduction that's included in the reliability and resiliency strategic plan, but goes even broader into permitting and interconnection, and making sure to smooth the way for that in electrification, where the reliability and resiliency plan really focuses heavily on electrical capacity and flexible energy technologies.
Okay, good. That's very helpful. I guess a question I have where we title these strategies, who's the audience for these strategies? If it is really pretty internal and people were just working on the implementation and not worrying about whether the public will understand the strategy, we'll communicate it in the end in a way that they understand. Then I'm not so worried about the titles, but a lot of the bolded titles of those strategies, I think could be clearer in terms of here's what it is.
Thanks, we can take that as a comment.
Under mobility, I didn't see anything about transit. There's not an item about transit. And I think that needs to be a strategy, unless I didn't see it correctly in the actual plan and only looked at the summary of it in the staff report. So it's on page 8 of the staff report is the 4 bullets under mobility. Is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah, so I can point you to in terms of improving access to transit. I can point you to CA 23, or improving the efficiency of transit, CA 23 and CA 24, which are focused on housing that supports transit and traffic signal operations that improve transit access. And then in terms of getting people to transit, the bicycle infrastructure is intended to facilitate that. It's not just bike trips to someplace, it's also to transit.
Exactly.
And then there are.
But where is that referenced?
What's that?
Where is the bike plan and?
That's CA 21.
But does it, in our discussions on the bike plan, one of the things that I've struggled with is this very issue of the bike and ped plan and its connectedness to transit access.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I could take that as a comment and talk to the transportation team.
Yeah.
And then the last I would point you to is CA4, which is related to multifamily EV charging infrastructure, and that includes integration of alternative transportation infrastructure for last mile solutions that can provide. It can also be a last mile solution. And that's all meant to be implemented in alignment with the e-mobility strategic plan, which also had transit as a heavily, as a heavy focus as well.
So I should know, so Caltrain has, and I think the city then adopted, has a station or a station access plan now for the entire corridor. And it's really about the sorts of things that I would hope we'll get in our bike and ped plan. But we're actually looking at whether to reframe that as station access and activation. So under the principle that if we want people to use transit, we want to make it easy for them to get there and have it be a positive experience as they arrive, including the work that Brad already has going in our lighting and otherwise in our tunnels at the station, but all the work, we have the work around the university station, but we really have two other stations that matter to us, Calab and San Antonio. But I'd really like to see, even if we don't go into details, that we have a transit bullet point, and within that, it's access and activation and whatever else belongs there. And then you also had down there on the micromobility, that ties in with the station too, because those are really the best hubs for micromobility in our community. It's probably the place that will make most sense. So I just want to mention that. Under the issue of distributed generation and storage, both microgrids and then home and business generation and storage and bidirectional flows. Where do we really have that?
That would be in the reliability and resiliency strategic plan.
But is it listed among our strategies? I didn't pick it up.
To the extent, so CA 17 talks about it in the context of permitting interconnection and other barrier reduction, which is consistent with the recommendations that we're taking to council on February 9th for what actions we want to take under the reliability and resiliency strategic plan.
Okay, so depending on what the council does on that, we may strengthen that. Is that what you're getting at, or?
I think that either of the approaches to barrier reduction that were recommended by the committee or the UAC would be consistent with CA 17.
Okay, well, that's another one where kind of what's the title there, that where does it say this is a category that we're going to pursue distributed generation and storage to whatever degree and through whatever initiatives we are, but this is an important categorical approach. I see Brad.
Can I ask a question about that? And I haven't looked at this for a while, but I thought I was recalling that in the discussion of the reliability and resiliency strategic plan, we had this removing barriers, but then when it came to promoting some of the technologies, we had found they weren't cost effective at this time. And I thought the action was that we were setting a time frame for periodically reevaluating them to see if we needed to change that policy.
I'm not sure. And one of the points that I would make about distributed generation and storage is that it hasn't been cost effective in our community, especially without time of use pricing, which we've seen is not going to be as radical of a pricing differential as we thought it might be. And yet we have a lot of solar installed. And as you folks we've heard back in this committee the last couple of years, these days it's almost always going in with storage, and it's not cost effective. It's happening because people are doing it on a value basis and a value of personal reliability and resiliency. And so the fact that we go and say, it doesn't make good economic sense, therefore it's not really there for us yet, it's happening. And so the question is, how do we instead embrace some of these things that are real and less quantifiable to the adopter?
Yeah, I just want to, so I want to respond to that. I want to echo what Brad said about where the committee settled on their recommendation, which was very much focused on barrier reduction as opposed to providing incentives. But there was a robust discussion on that long-term resiliency piece. And we're planning to come back again this year for some discussion about what the city's posture towards the long-term resiliency question needs to be. Right now, if people want, we pass through the value associated with the supply savings related to solar to customers, and it's still not cost effective just based on that. But like you said, those who do value long-term resiliency can install it. And I think by reducing barriers and providing outreach, we can remind people of that. But then the question is, are there specific situations where, where for long-term resiliency purposes that a different posture is needed, for specific types of uses? And that was a discussion that the UAC and the committee wanted to have in 2026. So we will be having that. But it is part of the reliability and resiliency strategic plan. It's something that we have, assuming council approves those recommendations, we will have direction.
Okay. And I would just note that I think there's another driver beyond the sense of personal reliability and resiliency, and that is personal or business climate action, that it's an individualized action that they feel they can take and they choose to take. And I think that's the other driver of why people do it. And on the reliability and resiliency, last time this came to the council, I had been really pushing for us setting specific numerical goals in the hours. Oh, Brad, you're chomping at it.
Yes, and I think you led the charge to pull that from the consent agenda in June. And so that aspect, those metrics are coming back to council on February 9th as part of the item that Jonathan was just discussing.
Great, thank you. As far as EV adoption and this uncertainty that Vicky was talking about based on the changing political environment, I remain pretty hopeful that our community is past it's I guess past a point where even if not everybody has EVs, it is now becoming the social norm, and people are assuming that their next car will be, and in part because we have a lot of folks with adequate disposable income, they can make that choice even if incentives aren't there. So those political headwinds are real, and certainly at the national and the state level, very real. I remain somewhat optimistic locally that we've got great momentum. And it's interesting what happens in a community when a new social norm emerges, and it's no longer, oh, that's interesting, you're an outlier. It becomes really a quiet expectation. Under the stormwater, I didn't see anything in the staff summary on filtration systems, so that we are looking at not only a green stormwater capture, but assuring that we don't have, or reducing the potential for contaminants getting into the groundwater system through filtration methods. For instance, Actera, I think we did a biochar pilot on a filtration, and Actera's done it. And there are emerging technologies on that are cost effective. And when you use biochar, it's a carbon capture technology that acts as a pollutant filter. And so is that part of our planning on stormwater?
There's some assessment currently going on the system like that was installed at Boulevard Park. We've actually had some issues with it, and there's some issues around regulatory specifications as well. But we're doing essentially some analytical work to look at the possibility of using that in other locations.
Down to three small ones. One is the point that I think Cedric brought up on pesticides, and that they don't fully respect lot lines. And so it's really a question of whether we want to look at either having that as part of our educational program and or something that might be more regulatory. I don't know the answer on where we would head, but I think it's a legitimate question.
We agree, and it's legitimate and kind of long-standing. My understanding is it's a state preemption against us doing any sort of regulatory action against pesticide use. We've been talking about this for a long time, so we're trying to model these integrated pest management behaviors as a city. And there's a lot of public education efforts that have been ongoing for years and continue, but didn't elevate to the point of just including an ongoing activity here.
Okay,
There are pretty stiff requirements actually under the municipal regional stormwater permit.
good, okay. And then the S9 is on our canopy. There was a question a few months ago that our calculation had in the last year added our Foothills Park, and I never heard back on that.
I think on that one, it was just inappropriately reported in that one instance.
Okay,
That was like an update on progress on goals, but the data that was reported didn't match the actual SCAP goal.
okay, good to hear. And last thing on the wildfire prevention, the question of what we do with the debris, in particular, the woody debris. I don't know if you know that there is now a mobile biochar pyrolysis unit that is being used for this kind of purpose. I think it's generally a little larger scale. It's not big scale, but ours is, it may not, our efforts may not lend itself to that, but I just wanted to make sure we were aware of that. That was the folks who were formerly with the what's the nonprofit, the Prevention Council, or what are they, the folks the nonprofit that we've hired in other cities, they were involved with that anyway.
Okay.
But it's a great concept. All right, thank you very much. And once again, when I think back of where we were just a few years ago, the strides we made, there are a lot of work yet to do, but we've come a long ways, and I really do think that we are cutting edge on this. Even if we're being cutting edge, doesn't mean we're necessarily going to hit that goal, but we will. As a last note, because the way carbon neutrality is treated, we have it, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get carbon neutrality adopted a couple of years ago, is that may be more achievable by 2030 than the 80% reduction. So thanks.
All right, well, thank you, staff and colleagues. I am quite enjoying this discussion because it's when we step back and look at the whole landscape, it's kind of a nice reset, and between public comment and my colleagues and staff, I'm just really enjoying this and learning a lot, and it's covering a lot of the questions I have. So now my notes will be quite out of order, but I'll do my best to comply with my own admonition at the outset that we're going to end by 4. So one, I just wanted to mention, it is exciting to see it all put together this way. And with respect to what others are doing in the region, I think you all know, and this isn't so much on the, like you mentioned, it's even if we can get visibility into their climate action plans, getting visibility into their implementation plans is hard. But with respect to just up a level at the climate action plans, I think I've mentioned before here, and I think you all know, that there's the BARCAP, the Bay Area Regional Climate Action Plan, which actually the Air District is in charge of administering for all the counties around the Bay, except Santa Clara County, which has its own administration of the county climate action plans where they're supposed to go and look at everybody's climate action plan. So I think you all are likely in touch with the county people on that. And it's interesting because the bar cap that presentation actually comes to the committee I chair, the policy committee at the Air District. And so last year they came and they said, yeah, we do everybody but Santa Clara. And so they talked about that. And I said, well, next year, could you bring Santa Clara? So they did this past year. And we had sort of two dovetailing presentations. But I think it is really interesting to see ours and then our counties and then the Bay areas. And they're trying to kind of gather all that. And they're in fact having to submit those, they call it I just pulled it up, the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan for the Bay Area was due to have been submitted to the EPA just this past fall, just a couple months ago. So we could pull that and look at it. And what all that leads me to ask is, I don't recall in the SCAP itself, and I don't know whether it's appropriate to put something in our implementation plan, but interacting with that, because obviously we love being climate leaders and innovators, and we should be, and I feel that we actually have a responsibility to be, given the nature of our community. But at the end of the day, just like pesticides don't respect boundaries, nor do our greenhouse gases or anything else. And so should we have any kind of nod to the fact that interacting with these county and regional climate action plans is something we should do?
I think we could take that as an action. And we have been in touch with Santa Clara as well, County of Santa Clara. But I think we could take that as an action even without adding it to the climate action, the 2026-2027 plan. This is just something that we are doing and need to be doing as part of our day-to-day work.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're already doing on our day-to-day work. We are part of the Green Cities California that meets monthly and discusses all of these issues, and we compare notes and share best practices. And then we also, through the Santa Clara County Climate Collaborative, we participate in that. And because, as you said, emissions and things don't know boundaries. We also participate in the San Mateo County's RICAPS, which I don't remember what it stands for, but Regional Something Climate Action.
Integrated Climate Action
Yeah, right,
Planning
there you go.
Forum.
And there's Bay Red and on and on. Yeah. So I was aware of a lot of that, not all of it, and I don't doubt that you all are doing this. I guess what I'm wondering is whether council should just underscore that as something we value by just writing it down somewhere in our plan or our work plan. I don't know which and where, but it seems to me that that is something we should value, is how we interact with entities beyond just our municipality on that.
It doesn't seem like it should be noted up in the plan.
Yeah, on its face, I think that sounds fine. Let us take a look at the SCAP. The one minor concern I have about some ideas is that if we didn't include the kind of base of it in the SCAP goals and key actions, then it's potentially problematic to say we're putting it in the work plan for the SCAP where we're relying on CEQA for that document and such things. But I think we probably have something in there.
We do. So in the narrative of SCAP, we do talk about regional collaboration. And then for certain specific action items in the SCAP, we do also refer to regional collaboration, especially around mobility and wildfire protection and sea level rise.
And we do have a narrative in the work plan itself. And there are places in the narrative where we might be able to integrate regional collaboration as a sort of blanket statement over all of these work items as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm not trying to add work or add anything to your plate, because I do believe you're already doing it. I just think that to have council's imprimatur on the fact that we appreciate, respect, and want that to happen is something we should just say somewhere.
I think let us go look at that. could see that we could be comfortable doing something like that. And I guess I would say an added benefit of that is that when you get our periodic reports on the status of what we're doing on all these things, then you'll hear a little bit about, these are the different entities or groups we've been participating in.
That's great. Okay, so then next on electric vehicles, on this ongoing debate, what's going to happen to that? I actually happen to agree with you, Councilmember Burt, and I certainly hope you're right. I think that not only do we have the norm here in town, but just honestly, driving those darn things is just a better driving experience, I believe. So I think whether you do it because it's a social norm or because it's green or because you like the way they drive, I think that's true. I do worry though about the rate of adoption and particularly outside of our community. And since we have so many people who commute in every day, I do worry more about norms or cost or, taking away some of the ability to afford them. I'm still a little worried about what it does, but we'll all see. And so just appreciate that you're aware of that and monitoring it. I'm gonna skip that one. Okay, just to sort of quickly go through, like I said, a lot of these have been covered and I concur with where things have landed. Yeah, that was news to me, and I appreciate you telling us on the pesticides thing that there could be preemption issues there, because I was gonna ask if we could sort of bake that in more expressly into our green stormwater infrastructure project or something like, runoff, something there, but if all we can do is public education, we're doing it, it sounds like you're kind of maxing out, but I underscore that the desire to max out on what we can do on like pesticides on private land.
Yeah, I'll just add that we also do a lot of advocacy at the state level, trying to push for pesticide regulations that accomplish what we want.
Oh, that's
So it's
good.
not just the local public education.
Okay, that's terrific. Good. I support that as well. On the communications, I also I concur with what's been said. I know that our friends at Carbon Free Palo Alto have been talking about a decarbonization marketing plan, and I think that kind of can pull together some of the three goals we have here. And I'm curious what your feedback is to kind of have an overall marketing plan or to develop one, or do you feel that that's already covered and on the docket here?
You want to speak to that or?
Sure. So we have previously had several iterations of a marketing plan. And we can certainly review it and update it. Well, we're in the process of looking at parts of it anyways. And we do have, I think it was last year where we reviewed a marketing plan with the committee and the working group. Was it last year or the year
I
before?
remember the working group back when we could do that, so I think it was 2024.
Right, I'm thinking, yes, 2024. So we can look at that again. I know that we are also working with citizens group as well to help us with our communications and marketing. And we are scaling up the work that we're doing with the city manager's office communications team
That's good.
as well. We're meeting with them regularly now, with several meetings a week, to ensure not only that we're on the right track, but also to add 80x30 more robustly in all of our communications. That's something new that we're rolling out. And we'll just continue to take all this feedback and prioritize our communications efforts.
Yeah.
Can I add to this that what you're talking about though, in terms of having a plan and, trying to meet specific objectives and reporting out on how we actually achieve those is part of C3. The last sentence is annually develop, implement, and report out on SCAP communications objectives and progress. And that's meant to achieve the goals that a marketing plan achieves without the sort of, we don't want to keep keep generating large written documents we want to be executing. And so this is meant to be an efficient way to meet the goals of a marketing plan.
Yeah, I appreciate that we don't want to spend a lot of staff and committee time debating marketing plans. We want to actually do one, but on the other hand, we want it to be smart. And I think that's what Councilmember Burt was getting at, like where the friction points, where what is the most effective. So, putting attention toward that, and I like what I would call sort of mainstreaming it by working with the city manager's office. And, so I think there's content, there's how we, so it's sort of the marketing of that comment, making it digestible and interesting. And then there's mediums, whether we would, is it not just bill inserts, but is it podcasts? I mean, I may be getting a little ahead of myself, but there's a lot to think about to try to get it to raise the sort of cognition where people are really aware of what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of cool stuff and we've been doing a lot of marketing, but to get it so it's actually impactful and effective, it's just a lot of different levers we can pull. So.
And we also just did a communications training for our youth climate advisory board as well. And they are going to start helping craft team focused social media.
That's great. And I would suggest that instead of just training them, they should train us. Because honestly, they're better at it. They speak differently. They use different modes. We don't know how to deal with it. At least I don't for people, under 30. So anyway, all right. I was really pleased to see the when we talked about the workshop feedback, and one of the items there was provide guidance to renters on how they can reduce emissions, because that certainly came up at the tabletop exercise at the retreat we had. And it just seems important because we have so many renters, and oftentimes they feel disempowered to do a lot because they aren't the ones that are installing water heaters or EV chargers. And I think there is still a lot. And so I really appreciate that being here. And could you remind me how that got incorporated into our plan?
Yeah, went to CA1, which is continuing the advanced home electrification pilot programs. And the last sentence is explore ways to promote resources for renters. And it goes on to talk about the types of resources.
Great. And you were on it with every sentence. That's great. No, I'm glad to hear that. All right, and I'm just going to turn past the horizontal levy project, but I did do that video on it, so maybe we can put that into our marketing thing. I haven't seen if they've posted it yet, but the ICLEI video on our horizontal levy project. Let's see. I echo the kudos for the reducing disposable foodware. I was going to ask though, 2027 feels like it's far out. I know we've got a lot on our plate, no pun intended. But could you talk to me about why it would take that long for an ordinance? Just research it.
Which number?
So I'm looking at S15 and it's on slide 14.
Penny single-use disposable containers and reduce disposable.
Yeah, I think you added the and reduce disposable foodware based on feedback.
Right.
Well, I'll add one thing is that we had plans to do this earlier, and then the pandemic came and restaurants were so hard hit that for a long time we haven't wanted to pursue additional requirements. And then there's been new state legislation that imposed requirements. And in fact, I think it was Mr. Cole, I'm not sure, or Cedric, who mentioned, no, it was Cedric who mentioned his collection of takeout utensils that he didn't ask for. There's actually a state law now that makes it illegal for restaurants to provide those if you haven't specifically asked for them when you order, or if you didn't ask for it at the restaurant. So I just offer that up as an example. In my talking with the zero waste staff, I've asked that before we proceed with developing new things and passing new ordinances, we make really sure that we're getting compliance with the things we've already done and that the state has done. So
And if
that's
we-
one aspect of this 2027 phase.
And we should educate consumers about that as part of our marketing. Yeah, that's great to know. Okay, and I think skip that one. So then lastly, again, more of the working group feedback you discussed. Actually, the very last one, the heat island effects, that are, addressed in S9 in relation to urban canopy, and then said also explored separately by the Stanford students, and that's that Cool Cities initiative that we supported and last year when they did their report out over in East Palo Alto. But I guess my question is, it was explored by them, but it seemed that they had a lot of thoughts about how, implementation processes to achieve Cool Cities objectives. And a lot of those seem to be things we're already doing, green stormwater and canopy increase and et cetera. But is that accurate, or are there other go forward city efforts that are somehow covered in these implementation objectives?
One other that I recall that I'd mentioned is cooling centers.
Yeah,
Be open during very hot times, and that's another thing the city is doing.
because I was quite impressed with the whole Cool Cities initiative, and it's just going to become more and more important year by year. So I wanted to make sure we captured that.
I just also want to point out that a lot of the electrification work that we're doing inherently helps to combat the effects of heat islands and warming, because heat pumps add air conditioning to homes where it may not have been there before.
Yeah, I was sort of treating the symptom, not the cause, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, it's both dealing with the symptoms and trying to reduce them.
Mhm. Okay, well, I'm quite excited about this, and I'm sure we'll, continue to evaluate I mean, we could talk about it endlessly because there's just so much here, but that's great. And I love the way it's evolved. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to see if Councilmember Liu, and we'll do one more.
Yes. A really interesting discussion. Have a few comments and questions. Just zooming out though first, totally understand that we might fall short of 80 by 30. The funding and financing study was really interesting towards that, and thanks for indulging my questions there. And it's definitely not a failure in any negative way. It's something we should really celebrate and be positive about how far we've come and how ambitious of a goal that we're taking. But I think we still should talk this year about a better goal. Maybe it's like 80 by 30 on a per capita basis. Not quite sure if that math works. Because setting ambitious goals is great, but then at some point, if there's a goal that we know we likely will not hit, it can mentally let us kind of feel like we're off the hook, or it could reduce some of the credibility if we're marketing, we need 80 by 30 for these reasons, when people, and no one looks that deeply, but like when people know that it might not actually be a credible outcome. On our work plan, definitely agree with Councilmember Burt that we should try to associate more numerical goals here. I understand also that I guess squishy was the word on some of these numbers. It's tricky. There could be ranges. I definitely like how some of these do have numbers already, though, like electrifying 3 to 5 multifamily buildings. Like having some reference points are really positive, and wherever we can quantify things. Some questions on specific programs. On, I guess, CA 12 on partnerships with large commercial facility owners. One thing I've been curious about for a while, and maybe this is my own curiosity, is Stanford Medical and Stanford Children's Hospital have, I think, separate but fairly ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals. And I am not sure where they are at or what our partnership is with them, but if they have 20 by 30 goals as well. Sorry, 2030 goals, not 20 by 30. If they could be one of the partnerships, I think that would be a really great one.
So we already actually have partnered with them on some EV charging and electrification efforts. I will note that the hospitals are probably one of the most challenging types of places to focus, but we have been in close contact with them.
Right. Okay. Maybe it's just not their time, not their year, but if they could explore greater electrification or traffic management, they've put themselves on the hook for a 50% reduction by 2030 against a 2012 baseline, which 50% against a 2012 baseline could be similarly ambitious as 80 by 30. So it'd be good to see if they can offer us anything else. On communications, I think emphasizing experiences and incentives is really good. Just some of the experiential sort of marketing that we've already seen community members do, I think, can be amplified even more by the city. One thought as well is that we don't really have a program that I think it specifically touches on induction cooktops. Obviously, in the context of whole home electrification, that would happen. But maybe there's some like marketing campaigns where we give people free electric, like $50 single burner induction cooktops if they commit to using them, or we sell them for $10 or some subsidized price. I note that specifically because seemingly the cost per ton of mitigation for induction cooking was it the highest return? It was something like that on the funding and financing study. So if the return on that is so positive, maybe the city can afford to just do a straight up subsidy, especially if it's only a $50 thing that gets something into people's homes, that gets them thinking about being more sustainable. One other comment. I was also looking out for the transit improvements here. And one thing that is in CA 21, so on bike and pedestrians, but is really a transit thing, is the Quarry Road extension at El Camino Park. And that completion date is fall 2027. And I understand that there are Caltrans processes and a lot of agencies that would use that Quarry Road extension. But fall 2027 feels like a decent way out since we approved this last year, since it's going to be such a huge improvement, shaving minutes off of every bus for thousands of people every day. I understand this is probably not the venue to try to talk about accelerating that or agitate about accelerating that, but that could be important for behavioral change. It's maybe the biggest one we have. And so maybe if, Councilmember Burt can pull some strings, we can get that to happen a little faster.
Brad has some comment on that.
I mean, it is a driveway, so from as a reclined abundance perspective, it feels like we should be able to do this quickly.
Glad Ezra do it.
Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't have the answer to that right now, but that's definitely in my area. So I'm happy to follow up and see where it stands and what the factors are. And how realistic or potentially conservative maybe this date is.
Okay. All right. I had a couple of just general things, not for this work plan, but for this immediate year, but sort of beyond that. Just hearing the conversations and reflecting on conversations about, for example, the financial viability of battery storage and solar and things like that. I think we should think more about development incentives for very efficient commercial and residential buildings. So if you are LEED certified or Passive House certified, or use particularly low carbon materials, or you install solar plus battery as a substantial renovation on some commercial building, we could give you a couple of feet on setbacks or height limits or daylight planes, because your exterior wall might literally be 1 foot thicker. So let's just give you let you encroach 1 foot into the setback or something. I don't know, something that doesn't really just give away a lot of commercial square footage, but that when people look at it will actually be, oh, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars of value actually that I grew. Or maybe some sort of transferable development right for housing and retail, or maybe there's some development incentive that we can talk to the planning department and think about what could come up in 2027 to 2028. And another thing that is going to be tricky, because I know we just approved a new contract with Canopy, is that we really need to rethink what we ask of Canopy, because they're very good at education and they're very good at driving volunteers, but they're doing several sort of planting events per year where they plant trees in people's backyards in South Palo Alto. And that's great, but there's still a good number of empty tree wells in South Palo Alto, where a tree was removed and maybe we can install a new one, but Canopy and volunteers aren't quite equipped to work on planting trees in the public right of way, or adding more trees in corners of Greer Park or something. It seems like there's some coordination that is still maybe we're not quite asking for the right thing out of Canopy.
Councilmember, can I ask for a clarification?
Yes.
Are you in any way referring to like sites that had a street tree that died or was removed and then haven't been replanted?
Yeah.
Okay. Those I think would generally be part of urban forestry's process for planting new trees, as opposed to Canopy, unless I'm missing something.
Okay.
I think the Canopy program is more about finding
Right.
new places, including what might be on private property in some instances.
Right.
But I take your comment.
And one thing I recall talking to Canopy's executive director about was that they were looking to find ways to work more on concrete. Like if there's a church parking lot in South Palo Alto and it's just a bare and hot parking lot, they would love to find a way to punch in 10 tree wells and plant 10 trees at that church or at that grocery store or arbitrary parking lot. And they were trying to find grants or ways to make that happen. And so like thinking about how we work with them on, opportunities like that would also be good for the heat island effect. And I think provides just sort of more public trees and maybe find more room for them to have impact. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Burke.
Yeah, thanks. So first, on the Quarry Road, it isn't just a driveway.
Right, I know.
It's a
There's
road,
signals there. It's a law. Yeah.
And it's a reconfiguration of all the
Yes.
bus bays and
Yeah.
everything. If we get that by the end of 2027, I will be pleased. No, I don't think there's
Okay.
much opportunity to bring it in. I'm hoping that through an aggressive approach, we'll actually meet that. If
Okay.
anybody wants to,
Thank you.
a better book than Abundance to read would be How Big Things Get Done by
Yeah.
really the global expert in mega projects and how to make them in projects in general. But in terms of other collaboration with Stanford, we've had a different kind of ad hoc collaborations of different sorts, but just about 2 months ago, they had a most of the day workshop that was titled in environmental resiliency for policymakers. There were only about 5 electeds there. There were a lot of staff from different cities and CCAs, a lot of Stanford folks from both the Doors School, the Hoover Institute, the hospitals. But what was really amazing is that they kind of buried the lead. The takeaway is that Stanford now has funding and a strategic approach toward collaboration with small government agencies. And that this is a new major strategic approach, and they have significant funding mostly through the Doors School. But they ended up not being clear on what is the whole framework, but that was the takeaway. So that's a very big pivot for them from saying, look, we are now strategically saying we're not just about research or spawning commercialization, we are about strategies with smaller government. One area that we have, I think, neglected taking advantage of for a long while is the largest fully electrified bus system in the United States, and the most advanced charging system in the United States that is available free of charge within our community and to surrounding communities, and that is the Marguerite system. VTA overlays the Marguerite schedule on their website, and I have tried for a dozen years to get our city to do the same, and we just don't. And so we have this asset that is open to the public. If we talk about what percentage of our residents know about our 80/30 plan, what percentage of residents know that the Marguerite system is open to the public free of charge? We charge at VTA. Marguerite's free. And so that's an under leveraged asset in our transit system. And then there was some discussion on canopy and heat islands. That made me recognize that we haven't had a discussion in some time about essentially cool roofs, and primarily in commercial buildings, and that whole movement on being able to reduce the heat island impact through having better materials on rooftops. And I don't know where that might fit. As I think about that and our low carbon concrete policy that, Brad, you've said, yeah, we're doing things, but I don't think we've ever gotten a report at this committee on what are we really doing on implementing that low carbon concrete policy, and how effective is that, and what do we see on the horizon, because that's a moving target as well. So any feedback on either of those two things or both?
I'm not sure about the cool roofs. I think that's in building code requirements and a regular part of project approvals.
Well, then I'd be very interested in understanding what are those requirements are. So are we cutting edge in that, or are there opportunities? Maybe we could get that as a follow-up and then figure out, that, but even if it's already in the building code, I would think it would be part of these strategies at the same time.
I think these items that are part of our regular codes and standards and water utility efficiency programs, we haven't included them as specific items because we're trying to include things that are, really focused on making changes.
Well, then I guess maybe rephrase it is, we need to understand what do we really have in the building code to understand whether we should have additional strategies, or we've already got it covered.
Yeah, we can take that as a question.
And then on low carbon concrete, where do we stand on that? Because that was a policy adoption, and I don't see it.
Yeah, it's the policy is in place in the city's REACH code. I think at one of these meetings, maybe in August or September, I gave a staff update, kind of an overview of where that program stands and how it's being implemented in my comments at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay,
But we haven't had a formal discussion or with anyone from the building department yet.
well, and that, that goes into, as we talk about what's next for us and everywhere else. We're in these scope 2 calculations, right? Scope,
Scope 1 and scope 2.
yeah. But on the horizon is scope 3, which is an even bigger challenge. But there are some ways in which we're already starting to do that. Low carbon concrete actually won't reduce our impact our 80-30 goal because it's not calculated that way, but it's a right thing to do, and it starts moving us in scope 3 efforts. I'd be interested in getting an update on that. I don't recall the presentation.
It was just verbal comments. At the
Okay,
beginning of the meeting.
but I drove getting that adopted as a policy, and 2-3 years later, I just don't know where we stand. And then one of the things that I don't know, which my colleagues had brought up on maybe it was Vicky on the renters. I've seen that I maybe it's just someone has submitted a state legislation for balcony solar in this whole movement, and I think it would have a couple benefits. One is just the value of that distributed generation, but the other is everybody who goes out of their way to have a solar in their balcony, it just drives their self-identity around these actions. And not to mention community identity. It's a big advertisement. I think that, the state legislation will kickstart that, but it's something that we should definitely have on the horizon. And then Vicky talked about kind of this issue of whether it's in our communication or not, of leveraging what we're doing. And it's, there's collaboration. There's kind of two levels. One is we want to learn from others, anybody who's doing cutting edge things that we don't have to invent the wheel on, but also as we, I think, rightfully recognize, our program is in many ways cutting edge. And when we look at why we do what we do, a big part is our responsibility to do our full share. But the other thing is really what impacts can we have? And we would have far greater impact on climate change by leveraging what we're doing and helping others than we are going to have if we actually get to 80-30. And so in my mind, that shouldn't be something that is maybe we say, and let's collaborate. I think it, once again, like we said if we don't overcome the communication, we're not going to get there. If we really want to have an impact, this has to be strategic in terms of how we leverage our accomplishments. And to feel that ultimately that'll be the thing that we can be most proud of. And then lastly, I checked, and it's Earth Foundries is the company that is doing the mobile biochar and wooded areas. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I love the induction cooktop idea, and I love the Marguerite schedule idea. And I also think that this concept I was putting forth about sort of naming our interest in collaboration could and should be enhanced by this last idea Pat mentioned about there's collaboration, but there's also intentional sharing. So it's kind of the marketing plan, but it's not just marketing to our residents to adopt these, but intentionally letting folks know, because it is just reminding me that people were just sort of walking up to me, and honestly, the Air District staff was the one that was promoting Palo Alto by getting me interviews to talk about not the Air District necessarily, but Palo Alto. And maybe we should try to do that for all of us when we can to really get out there, because we have an amazing staff here. I'm looking at you all and I mean it. And we have amazing colleagues who really, we do all care. In this city, I brag all the time about our residents and how phenomenal they are. It's not just pushing us, but supporting us in doing this. And I think that unique, soup of council, staff, and residents is just unparalleled in what I've seen. And so what we're doing is really cool, and bragging about it intentionally is probably something we ought to do. So I agree with you.
Bragging gets backlash.
Okay, well, I don't, I'm,
Yeah.
that's hyperbolic, so I agree with you. I don't mean, but it's the sharing. It's really what you were getting at, the sharing, because the sharing also implies the listening and learning as well. So it's a two-way street, but I think being a little intentional about that piece of the communication is the right idea. So I'm with you on that. That said, I would love to have a motion that we approve the 2026-27 SCAP work plan and receive the 4 studies identified on slide 19. So and we're saying we're receiving them as opposed to accepting them, because I think before you got here, John was talking about how some of the backdrop has changed, and it's not necessarily saying those studies have the only policy options we'll consider going forward, but those studies kind of are what they are based on when they were done. Is that roughly?
Yes, yeah, the outcomes are illustrative and the studies provide data and modeling tools. So not necessarily something that has to be accepted or approved, but received because of the interest that the council and the community want.
And the work plan, thank you, and the work plan perhaps as adjusted by today's discussion.
Yeah, that's the last part, is that, I don't know, well, maybe the best way to frame that would be with the work plan inclusive of consensus modifications, consensus of staff and committee modifications. So we might have said some stuff and you said, nah, that won't work. But the things that you agreed on, that we agreed on, get rolled in.
Yes, well, I think we could do that, and then with the report to council, we can include some information about the discussion and the changes that were made in response.
Yeah, and I like that. And then at council, if we want to discuss it further and further, we can. So that's great. All right. Well, so is that a motion?
Yeah, Christine, I don't know if you're usually miraculously.
Yes.
I'm happy to put it up still. I don't have all of it, but happy to put up what I have.
Okay.
Can we stipulate to the miraculous part? I say that staff and committee members.
Modifications agreed upon by staff and committee members. Does that sound right?
Well, I would note that the motion is a recommendation for the city council to do these things, so we may need to tweak. I mean, we know what it means.
Right. Okay. So
Modifications.
it's
Modifications.
Yeah, it's good.
so in the first, to recommend to the city council, and then
Modifications.
Staff and committee consensus modifications.
okay.
Sure.
All right, go team. That was some teamwork.
All right. A second.
I'll second it. All right. Let's vote when you're ready, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Lou,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Byrd.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
Great. All right. Well, thank you to our nimble clerk, to our staff, to my colleagues. And with that, I believe we are adjourned. Or do we have next meeting? Is that the?
We don't.
Oh,
We
wait,
don't
it's
have a next
January.
meeting on this committee. We'll be waiting for
Okay, we'll have to
new
get
committee
sor-
for these.
We'll get started on that.
2025 capstone meeting.
Yeah.
Ah, there we are. Well, what a great year. Thank you all.